Welcome to Extracurricular. I'm your co-host, Eddie Geller.
And I'm your other co-host, Stephanie Vanos, a member of the Orange County School Board for District 6, but here I am unofficially, as always.
You know I love you, but you didn't quite nail that one. You had a little bit of a hiccup.
You know what? We don't have time for perfect here.
We don't have time for perfect. That's exactly correct. Welcome to this week's podcast. I know we've been out for a couple of weeks. Don't blame us. Don't hate us. We're trying our best here. But we got a really great episode today. Today we're going to be talking to Orlando Sentinel columnist Scott Maxwell. Tell us a little bit about Scott Maxwell.
Scott has, I followed him for years. He, I think, is such a great writer, just looks into a variety of different issues. I think just always comes with the facts and always has takes that I appreciate, even if I don't always agree with him. I often do. I don't always, but I really appreciate the energy. I appreciate his writing. I appreciate just the work he does to just produce entertaining and educated columns.
I love that. And I think today's episode is a lot of both understanding like how columnists think of their columns and how they write it, and specifically some stuff about Orlando and reactions to this past week's elections. We had some elections. So I do want to point out, we talked at the beginning of the interview about some of his reflections, or towards the beginning of the interview, maybe the first third, talk about the school board chair election between Angie Gallo and Alicia Ferranton, which Angie Gallo was victorious. And for those who don't know, and we kind of talk about it in the interview, Angie Gallo, who's been on this podcast, Stephanie endorsed, we really like Angie, Alicia, Moms for Liberty, lost. So a little bit of context, because I think looking back, as I think about when we interviewed Scott, I don't know that we articulated that. So when we get to that portion, those are the two, that's kind of the first race that we're talking about. Does that seem clear to you, Steph?
Seems clear to me, and now everybody knows.
And now everybody knows. Steph, how come you don't have an opinion column? You have a lot of opinions.
I do have a lot of opinions. Maybe someday. We'll see what tomorrow brings.
We'll see what tomorrow brings. I'll pay you to write an opinion column.
I love it. By the way, I do want to go back and say, for parents, like, the best line ever is, we'll see what tomorrow brings. Your kids want something, we'll see what tomorrow brings.
See, no matter what. Yeah, but you use that on me a lot, and I know what it means, so it's a little hurtful when I hear it.
Well, we'll see what tomorrow brings.
Okay. If you're new to the podcast, and we hope that you're enjoying this as a new person, but if you're sticking around, we also appreciate that very much. We like everyone. If you're listening to this, we're grateful, unless you're hate listening. But if you're hate listening,
you're still listening.
Any way that you want to listen, if you could subscribe to this podcast, rate us. Steph, what can they rate us?
5 stars only.
5 stars only. And we're also on Instagram at extracurricular_podcast, where we like to hang out. People occasionally send us DMs, and they occasionally send us emails at podcastextracurricular@gmail.com. You're not sending that email address a lot of emails, Steph. Why not?
What is the email again?
podcastextracurricular@gmail.com. Steph, I mentioned this at the top. We were out for a couple weeks. Are we okay?
We're okay. You know, that summer cold or summer virus, no joke, not fun. So that wasn't great. That personally sent me back a couple of days. Like over a week.
It sent me back. We tried in earnest for you not to get me sick, but we failed in earnest. So
lessons learned.
So I got sick right after you got sick. And then you had a daughter that went off to college.
I did.
Go Gators.
I know. I'm excited. Yeah. We moved her in on Sunday, and she seems to be doing well. Started classes this week. So it was exciting, but also sad. And, parenting is complex.
Yeah. How do you feel?
Exactly those emotions. Yeah. I feel excited for her and excited for all of the things she's going to learn about herself and learn about the world, in college. But, I'm also sad. We've got my 3 girls, and now I have 2 girls, which they're still wonderful, but.
I noticed today you are not wearing orange and blue. Have you not embraced the Gator life yet?
Actually, I need a shirt. So if someone can direct me to a good place to get a good Gator shirt that's not completely overpriced, please let me know.
There's got to be a lot of places that will sell you Florida Gator merchandise.
But I want something that's good, not...
Well, you might be buying a lot of merchandise over the next 4 years. So
We'll see. I have a flag, so that's exciting. But you also were busy one weekend too with Countdown Improv.
Yes, that's true. I did do an improv festival, the Countdown Improv Festival, run by, I've mentioned this on the podcast before, Kelly Buttermore and Justin Peter. So I went there and I performed in a couple of shows and had a really nice time, enjoyed the performances, but also got into a little bit of a kerfuffle with a stage manager who was trying to force us to go on stage 5 minutes before our printed start time. And you know me, I don't really get into it with people. I don't have, in a fight or flight moment, like I will often, fly. But this guy was trying to get us to go on stage. The start time of the show was at 7:10. Tried to get us to go on at 7:05 because that's what he had written. And I was like, no, we're not going on stage 5 minutes before people think we're supposed to go out there. Like anyone who's ever been to a show is like, they never start early. They always start late or do start on time. So anyway, I stood my ground, and was like, we're not going out. And then the guy checked with the people who are running the festival. I was like, actually, we're running late, so you're gonna have to start the whole thing late. But anyway, I was really fired up. You haven't seen me that fired up. You weren't there at the festival to see this, but I don't know. What is it like seeing me at my full?
Well, the only other time I've really seen you that way is when, I don't know, was it Walmart or someone messed up your switch to order, and you were so mad. And
I was very angry.
I feel like usually, as we've talked about before on this podcast, in the car is my time to shine. It's my rage time to shine in the car. But I really never see that from you. But man, if it involves Switch 2 or improv, was it that you thought people wouldn't be there to watch the show, or was it that you just wanted the rule to be followed and he wasn't following it and he was trying to boss you around and being incorrect about it?
Well, it was more the former, that if someone plans for a show to start, a lot of people get there right on time or a little bit after it starts. So to get us to start before the start time, people are going to be walking in as we're in the middle of the show, which is, we were performing in a big theater, wouldn't have been that big of a deal, but it's just not done. You just don't perform before your start time. That's just not a thing you do unless there's extreme circumstances. We were not in those extreme circumstances. And, this guy was just trying to big time me and I just wasn't going to have it.
That's what
I was like, do you know who my girlfriend is?
He's like, what is that?
Oh, excuse me, my partner.
Okay. Well, speaking of shows, we saw a show. A movie. We
did see a movie. Wait, before we talk about the movie, can we talk for just a minute about the elections this past week? I know we talk about it on the pod, but I haven't really gotten your takes. We mentioned Angie Gallo on the podcast, got the extracurricular podcast bump, and also Angie Nixon, another Angie, got the extracurricular podcast bump and won by 10 points here in the state of Florida. How are you feeling?
That's true. Actually, I didn't realize not only was it two Angies, but two Angies that were on the pod. I love it.
This is what we do here.
No, it was great. I mean, we were at Angie's watch party, so it was fun to just kind of watch those final results come in. That was really fun to be there with her and her family and some supporters. But while we were waiting for her numbers to come in, we were watching the Senate race numbers come in as well. And I was personally. I mean, I really like Angie. I think
Angie Nixon. Sorry, just because there's got a couple of Angies.
I think she ran I think she ran the kind of campaign that people want.
Yes.
Right now.
I agree.
And I think that helped her tremendously.
Yeah. And she's been doing the work. I mean, not just the work in her campaign, but the work in Tallahassee fighting for the things that she cares about. And sorry.
No, yeah. And I mean, exactly. I think she's been fighting for just everyday people. She's been fighting for things that she cares about. And I think she's just been present. She's just been in the community. She was working hard. And I just didn't see that same kind of work and kind of engagement on the other side, her opponent, her Democratic opponent.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And we're very happy for Angie. And, I think we talk about it on the podcast. It's going to be tough for her, just like it will be tough for any Democratic statewide, candidate to win here in Florida. But I think she's got the goods, and I know she raised $1 million in her first 24 hours. So, we will do what we can, and we're excited about her and all the, Democratic candidates running. How does it feel now that we haven't hit the general election yet, so you guys have a little more time, but start thinking about whether you're going to run again.
Oh my God. No, we haven't hit the general election yet, so we're still in this election cycle.
Okay, well, I'm going to start.
And there's some great candidates that I really want to support this cycle too. So
okay, well, I'm going to circle back to this in a few months because you're going to have to face the music at some point.
Well, this has been an engaging conversation, but let's hear from Scott Maxwell and let's listen to this great interview. Welcome to the pod, Scott Maxwell. It's such an honor to have you here.
It is a pleasure to be here with you on an exciting week, no less.
Oh, very exciting week. I have read your columns for so many years, so it's always interested in your opinions, and I think you're just a fantastic writer and researcher. So.
Oh, that's kind of you to say, and you've been a good resource for me since you've taken elected office, and I appreciate your willingness to speak up on those issues.
Oh, of course. Well, maybe I was thinking before we get into to this exciting week, maybe you could just give background of kind of how you got to be an opinion columnist, and how you kind of your journalism journey, if you will.
Yeah, I don't completely know. I think some people are just drawn to it. And I grew up a child in the 70s when Watergate was happening. And so there was something kind of intoxicating about the idea of a couple of ink-stained wretches being able to topple a presidency. And when I was growing up, my dad was a lawyer. I would go to his law firm. And back in those days, these are mimeographs. Now I'm making myself sound really dated. And
oh, wait. I don't even know what a mimeograph is.
Just picture one of those old-timey guys with a bow tie cranking out papers. And I would make copies of the Maxwell House News. And
I love that.
They had really breaking stories like Scott's dad mows grass. And I would deliver them around the neighborhood.
What was your source for that one?
Yeah, you know what, Eddie? We don't betray that.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Okay, that's rule number one. Thank you. And I don't know. I just sort of was drawn to that, and even thought you might appreciate this. I wanted to follow in my father, the lawyer's footsteps, and was taking the LSAT. And I was halfway through the LSAT, and I think I was doing okay on the LSAT. And I said, "Good God Almighty, this is not what I want to do." And I was the only person in that class that folded. And I think it's because lawyers take like 9 sentences to say one point, and our job is to try to simplify.
True.
So anyway, I walked out.
Wow,
and
you made it that far.
That's so funny. I also walked out of the LSAT.
No way.
Yes, and I had this realization. My heart was not in it, but
Yeah.
I had this. I was sitting there for at least 5 minutes being like, do I have the guts to just get up and walk out of this room?
Yeah.
Because it was so awkward. But that's so funny that you did that as well.
No, and I do think that I try to think pretty logically. I spend more time reading statutes and litigation than most non-lawyers. Non-lawyers do. And you have to understand that. And I think you probably can appreciate the difference between an and or an or in statute or something like that. It can be a world of difference. Yep. Anyway, but I've always liked the idea of there's an old expression that a journalist's job is to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable, and I think that's sort of what I've always liked to do.
I love it. Well, you're very good at it.
Well, thanks. And I should say, you asked me how I became a columnist. Those jobs aren't too common.
Right.
I came down here. I went to school at Chapel Hill and went to school. Worked in the Winston-Salem Journal in Winston-Salem for about 4 years. Then came down here and was a reporter here for 4 years before I started writing a column. And I've been doing that now for since '98. So about 2002, 25 years or so.
It's amazing.
So how did that opportunity come to you that you were, because I feel like that would be a sought after position to have at a
It was.
newspaper?
I was hoping you wouldn't ask because my beginning was a little inauspicious. Back in those days, we may talk about the newspaper business. It ain't great. There's in case that's some breaking news. When I started, there were 400 people in my newsroom. There are 40 or less right now. But when I started, there were lots of columnists. There was a business columnist. There were 2 Metro columnists. There were multiple sports columnists. And the columnist job that had just opened was actually a society columnist. So I wasn't super keen on that, but I decided I would take what was offered. So for my first year, I followed boy band parties and I went to fancy weddings and I went to the gala circuit and I wrote about that stuff. And I did a mix of, tried to insert some politics into it. And I did it for about 2 years. And I finally went to one wedding, one over-the-top wedding, and I don't need to say whose it was, but it was David Siegel's son. And after I went and covered that for the paper, I came in the next morning and I said, I really appreciate this opportunity, but I can't do this anymore. I can only do it if I write about politics and policy. And am I allowed to cuss?
Of course, yeah.
Absolutely.
The editor said, "Do whatever the fuck you want to do." And it was a great moment. And from that moment on, I left that. I had some interesting moments. My son enjoys has Googled it, but my future son-in-law, there was a weird moment when all of the world was looking for Wesley Snipes, who was from Orlando and at school. And I can't remember what I wrote, but Wesley sent me an email and revealed his location. I want to say he was in Namibia.
Oh my goodness.
And I was the first guy to locate. I mean, the feds zoomed in on him, on Wesley. Not good for him, because he hadn't paid taxes for a while. He declared himself his own country.
Oh yeah, that's tough.
And there are other weird that's in those days I'd interact with Scott Stapp and Carrot Top and things like that. But it was interesting, but it wasn't for me.
Yeah. I bet you did meet a lot of people though.
Yeah, I did. And in fact, on the sort of gala circuit, you run into the people who are financing campaigns and making things happen. And when you go to those things, you see the public officials who really, some of whom like to be there and some of whom I've learned would do things in their positions so they would get invitations to those sort of parties. And there is some overlap.
For sure.
Well, it's funny being an opinion columnist. I'm sure there's many people, maybe myself included, who think, oh, I could do that. I have opinions. I could write about them. What is it that makes you sharp and other opinion writers sharp at what they do? How do you go from I have a take on this to I'm going to write something that's going to, move people or make people think?
Yeah, and I'm going to make this your most profane podcast ever.
Please.
You've probably heard the expression, opinions are like assholes.
Yes.
Everybody's got one and a lot of them stink. I think the difference, what I've learned from reading other opinion columnists who are good is they're bringing something new to the table. And they're also giving a wholehearted sort of full circle view of an issue. And by that, I guess what I'm sort of mean is that when I have an opinion, I take, Stephanie and I were just talking about school start times. You could do a whole show on school start times.
We did part of a show
starring us.
The research is pretty clear that for older teenagers, it needs to be later.
Right.
But when I begin on that crusade, one of the first things I'm going to do is I'm going to spend as much time as I can seeking out the opposing opinion of that. And it's not because I'm some altruistic saint. It's because I would much rather hear the best argument against a case I'm making before I publish than after, and I can address what those concerns are, or maybe even change my opinion if I can. So I think the best opinion columnists are really taking into consideration all of the aspects. If I write about abortion, I know darn well that half the people feel one way and half if I rail about one position and don't acknowledge the other, I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to change anybody's mind. I'm just going to be speaking to the choir. And I don't think, I think that'd be sort of a waste of a pulpit.
Yeah.
So I think it's good to acknowledge what the other folks are and give somebody something new to a debate that they haven't contemplated before.
Love that.
Have you ever researched a topic that you had a strong opinion on, and then as you were researching it and writing it, you changed your mind?
Yeah, I've also had some on occasion where I've wanted to really go balls to the wall after an individual, and I've sent them an email or heard something, and then I decided not to write afterwards. And it's not necessarily that after I hear what they have to say, I'm on their team, but I'm not as convinced. And they've said something that at least gave me pause. And the worst thing I think any columnist could do is just go after someone and have the facts wrong. I mean, you could be on the wrong side of history. That's certainly true, but you would never want to have that wrong. And if somebody gives you an explanation that at least gives you pause, I don't want to ever be writing something that says, I'm sorry, I didn't take this into consideration before I wrote it. So,
well, and I feel like in today's world, many people just don't respond. and give you an opinion. And so when someone actually does take the time to be thoughtful and talk to you, I can see how that really can, help people actually make their case, or at least help you not, as you said, kind of go as hard just because they're willing to sit down and have a conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I will say, words don't mean a ton to me. There are a lot of people, when you catch them dead to rights on something, you know what they do? They say, can we sit down? And sometimes I'll say, no, I don't really. You can tell me whatever you want to say in an email or something like that, but I don't. A lot of people think if they look you in the eye, Mike Thomas, who was another columnist at the paper, said, you don't play with the puppies before you euthanize them. and there are a lot of people who think that if they look you in the eye, you won't euthanize them. But that doesn't usually work with me. But I always hear. But I will tell you, in 2026, I rely a lot more on the written word than I used to, especially in this age in the hashtag fake news, where people will claim that you misrepresented something. I have found that the people who like to claim they were misrepresented are the ones least inclined to put things in writing so that their responses can be documented. And I've had many times where I've wanted to write something. I'll give you just an example. One of the biggest blowhards in state government is Blazing Googly, in my estimation, the state's CFO. And I found something. I'll get cut to the chase, but he was, talking about. He was going about Disney after something. Well, it turns out Blaze had stock in Disney at one point in time, and we caught him doing a favor for Disney legislatively. And then after he sold his stock, he started going after Disney. So if it's not insider trading, it at least looks like he's doing. And when I got all the documents that proved it, and I sent it to him personally and his office called and said, can we have a conversation? I said, that's not the kind of thing we need to have a conversation for. You can tell me if any of the facts I have are wrong. You can give me an explanation for why you want to do it. But and of course, it was supposed to be an off-the-record conversation. So I'm not doing that.
Do you usually do that? Send people sort of your receipts when you publish something?
Yeah, okay. And most of the time when I'm trying to think of that still accurate. Yeah, I think most of the time when I'm writing something rough about a person, they're not going to be surprised by it. I often think that at the end of a conversation or an interview, you may not like me, but you're not going to be surprised. Pick one person out of the blue, Alicia Ferran. When I wrote about her last time, I sent everything I had to her, and she responded one time and didn't respond after that. The next column, but some of these questions were like when she was trying to ban a book. I read the book. I took however many days it took me to read a book. And then when I was done, I went, wait a minute, did she read the book? And I asked her a question. Did you read this book that you were calling for banning in its entirety? And she wouldn't answer that question. So you can take away what you will from that.
Well, it's funny. We can talk about an article you just wrote that will be, I guess, in the Sunday paper.
Yes, ma'am.
About actually the school board races this cycle. So this was a big week for Orange County. But I'll let you what was your takeaway from that? We'll start with the school board race, and I know you wrote about the other races as well. But what was sort of your big takeaway?
Well, I'm not telling you anything I don't think you both already know, but I believe this was a defining moment for this community. And I actually had told a lot of people that beforehand. So I was going to end up with mud on my face if it didn't come out. Well, no, it would have been defining either way. But over the past, I'd say 5-6 years, there's sort of been this war on education that's waged from the Moms for Liberty type crowd, aided or led by Ron DeSantis as well. And it's really been about censorship. It's been about book banning. It's been about othering, going against LGBTQ, demonizing, dividing. And I think it's been part of an ideological crusade, but it's also just part of a broader campaign of smothering and smearing public schools and making them unattractive and pointing people to private schools where they can now get vouchers and go to that. And that's what I think was at stake here. And there was a candidate who'd been on the school board, Alicia Ferran, who, as I mentioned in the story I just told, there was a book. She tried to pull many books off the shelf, as you're well aware. But one was John Green's Looking for Alaska, and she started trying to do that before she even got on the school board.
That's right. Yeah.
And I was fortunate enough to say to talk to John Green about that after when she wanted to do that. And I wanted to see, and this is, I'm not trying to blow smoke up my own rear, but I really...
That would be impressive if you could do that, though.
I'd be very limber. I really wanted to make sure, see the perspective, because I didn't want to defend a book and then have, there be some orgy or something in there. So I read the whole book, and there are like 2 pages of sex and then some other passing references throughout. I mean, it's a book about coming of age of a teenager, but the vast majority of this book is about childhood poverty. It's about anxiety. It's about trying to fit in. It's got comparative literature. It's got comparative religion. It's got a whole bunch of stuff in it. So, I read the whole book, and then I felt a lot more emboldened about my ability to say, this is nuts. This is a book that won an award from American Literary Society for attracting young people to literature and making them want to read more. So anyway, that was one of the first things she did when she came on. And then it wasn't even just going after things like pride that I know you're aware of, or the LGBTQ plus resolutions. It was the way she did it, by at one point talking about how she was convinced that the plus stood for perversion. And I think it was sadomasochism. And it was really, so keep in mind here, we're talking about children. I mean, we're at least talking about minors. And this is a resolution, much like the school board does for autism or for Black History Month, that's meant to say all students are valued. And this was a leader who said perversion. That's what this actually is. What kind of a message does that send to a population that is not only more prone to be vulnerable and susceptible to bullying, but prone to suicide more than other people? And you have a leader talking about perversion. Anyway, put all those things together. I thought it was a pretty clear choice here. I haven't even mentioned the other candidate, Angie Gallo, who is a veteran school board member, recent or current past president of the School Board Association. Right. I would argue pretty focused on education rather than culture wars, and in fact has a background that's not flaming liberal for those who know. Who know. I believe she was working on at least Republican campaigns when she first came across my radar, I think. Yep. And so you had a pretty solid choice, one that was just wanting to talk about education and issues, and the other was culture war. And I said, well, we're going to see what this community is made of. And it was strong. It was 60-40. And that's a landslide by any definition. I mean, 55-45 in any candidate we'd be saying I had a clear mandate. And I think it was this community saying, not here.
Right.
Yeah.
You can have those debates in Tallahassee. You can have them in Brevard County or in the Panhandle, but not here. And I was encouraged.
Yeah.
So.
Steph, what did you win by? Can you remind the listeners?
Hey, District 6 is the best. What can I say? No one can compete.
What was that, 68%?
Yeah. So
there you go. There you go.
Well, what I liked about your piece, though, is you talked about, let me find it. You said, here we want history lessons that haven't been whitewashed and books that haven't been censored. Here we value intellectual curiosity and care about all students. And, it's interesting. I was having this conversation yesterday with someone about culture wars. And, sometimes people think that means like, well, we don't want to talk about books. And what I try to say is, if the book has been, challenged, if the, environmental science teachings have been questioned, I do think it's our duty to respond to that.
Absolutely.
And sometimes I think people think, well, if you don't want to engage in culture wars, then why do you respond? And I think, well, if the issue is brought up to us, we do need to have a strong defense of the First Amendment, of, the Supreme Court ruling in the Miller case, which I love that they call a loophole. I'm like, the loophole is literally the law, that we do need to have a vigorous defense, because I know when I knock doors, the first thing people asked me was, are you the book banner or not the book banner? Like, they want you to fight back, they want you to do that. So, but I do think there's a difference between like bringing these issues up and fighting back to make sure people understand that we are going to protect the things we care about: real history, books, access to books.
And I would add to that that let's not sort of be mistaken. There are books that have been inappropriate that have ended up on school libraries or in classrooms, and there are perfectly appropriate times for parents to come and say, I don't think this book should be available for my 4th and 5th graders. And there are perfect times when administrators should say, yes, you're right, that shouldn't be there. What I think a lot of people don't know, and what the Moms for Liberty don't want people to know, is that's always been the case. And there has always been a process virtually everywhere in any major school district for that to be happen. And then many times they take it, and I would argue often err on the side of caution with that sort of stuff. But yes, there's been in that process. That those discussions are healthy, but I don't think we should be scared of ideas. And one of the points I made in that column is that there's this sort of talking point about indoctrination. It's this boogeyman that that your kid's kindergartner teacher is trying to turn your little boy into a little girl, and you make them think that wokeism is the only way to go. I got to tell you, I never encountered that with my children in Orange County Public Schools. And if anything, I think they were exposed to a wide variety of ideas. And there was one of my son's high school teachers who at one point in time asked the class to read Atlas Shrugged. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with that book. It's been pretty widely panned by literary people who actually know this, but it is held up as a Bible among the conservative and neocon movement, particularly for opening the eyes of young people and making them sympathetic to the conservative. Point being, if you were looking for indoctrination, that would be the sort of thing. But it's also a book that's part of American lexicon and culture. And so when my son told me that his teacher had said, we read this, I said, by all means, if you have any questions, come back to me. Because I think kids should be exposed to all viewpoints. They should learn about all religions. They should learn about all the things. Anyway, I don't think we need to scream indoctrination. I think most parents get that, too. I don't think it's unusual.
Well, and I love the line I hear often from teachers that if I could indoctrinate my students, I would indoctrinate them to read the syllabus.
Or turn in their homework.
Or turn in their homework, so this idea that teachers have all this power to just impose this viewpoint is fictitious, but there's a lot of other things going on. And I think you articulated that well. Well, okay, so we talked about the school board chair race here in Orange County, and you've written some more about the elections this past week in Florida. I'm curious if you have some other takes. I know you do. What do you think is happening right now in Florida, and what do you think was reflected in this past week's primary elections?
Well, I should put out a top line that's probably going to not excite a lot of your listeners, and that's that I think we're in a very red state. And I don't think anything is going to change that. There may be ebbs and flows, but I think Nikki Fried is the only Democrat who's won a statewide office in the past decade, I think that is. And most shockingly, no Democrat has kicked a Republican out of statewide office, I think, in 30 years. I mean, it just had, it's in a statewide office. So I don't think that's going to change, likely. Now I'll put an asterisk on it. There were a couple of things that were interesting, and one is that the influence of Donald Trump really seems to be waning in this state. Byron Donalds got 48%, and that's normally that would be another landslide in a crowded field. But he was supposed to wipe the floor with this. Yeah. And in fact, his own campaign, I went back and pulled up the memos before I wrote the column on Wednesday. His own campaign had said that he was going to collect something like 63% of the vote with the exact same other people he was running against, and that once they ran ads telling people that it was Donald Trump, they predicted 71 to 73%. So this is his own campaign setting expectations. He did run ads nonstop that said Donald Trump wants you to vote for me, and it was pretty remarkable that not just a bunch, but the majority of Republicans in Florida said, no, I'm going to vote for somebody else. And there were a couple of candidates, Catalina, I can't remember her last name, and then Corey Mills, who had the president's endorsement, and they didn't win either. And once again, we're only talking Republicans. We're not talking about Democrats. Republicans decided they didn't listen. So I thought that was interesting. Obviously, Angie Nixon's victory was a surprise to a lot of people, and probably the biggest talking point among the Democrats. My take on that, and after talking to a lot of folks, is that I've sort of felt like Vindman was, a lot of Democrats felt like he was being shoved down their throat. And I'd always thought the first time when he announced his candidacy, I, as a political columnist from Florida, said, does he live in Florida? I mean,
I had the same question.
I did, and it turns out he moved here about 3 years ago, and he had the backing of Chuck Schumer and other folks. But I don't know that I think Angie Nixon is going to win. Let me stretch it. I do not think she's going to win. But I do think Democrats said we'd rather have somebody who's cut their teeth on the process, who's passionate, who knows Ron DeSantis, who's battled with Ron DeSantis. And I do have what might be a slightly unorthodox take, that I think she could actually be good for the ballot, because I think she is going to excite a population that is not going to be there. And then does a David Jolly benefit from a whole, because there was like an Andrew Gillum effect also. I thought he was not a very good candidate. I wrote about him having what I consider to be ethical problems before he ran. But he excited a population, and it was a super close race. So if Angie Nixon can excite a part of the electorate that gets out there, and maybe also makes David Jolly look more moderate, to people who are scared by the word socialist. That was one thing. I mean, just her personal beliefs aside, not the best politicking on her part to join the Democratic Socialists of America, if I'm correct, and I'm pretty sure I am, during the campaign.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. This is a state that has gotten more MAGA by the year. We are one of the a handful of states that voted for Donald Trump the year that Americans threw him out of office by an even heartier margin. Yeah. Like, he got impeached, and Floridians said, yeah, give me a double dose of that, please.
Wild, yeah.
So...
Yeah, no, it was an interesting choice, but and we were fans of Angie. I've had Angie on the show, and I'm
nice.
very excited by her candidacy. And as you said, it's going to be incredibly tough, especially you look at those primary vote numbers, how many voted in the Republican versus Democratic primaries. It's a real tough road to hoe, but I think you're exactly right. Like, she really excited a portion of the populace. Vindman, like you said, felt like he was shoved down people's throats, and he just was not an exciting, campaigner, and walked away from people who tried to interview him. So, I mean, I think there were just many holes in that candidacy.
You didn't even mention his wife, who did some weird
things.
Well, that really, I think, turned a lot of people against him. And I think also with Angie, I mean, she was really trying to be in communities. She worked her butt off. I mean, she was around the state. She was meeting with people. And I think that is, whether, I don't know, however you want to characterize people on the left, like, I think that part of it is just being in community, willing to talk, willing to listen, talking to, and I think that is really important.
And I think right now what Republicans who were not planning on facing Angie Nixon are doing is they're doing a lot of focus grouping, because they would see the video of Angie taking a bullhorn and going on this, and they think it's off-putting. I'm not sure that the general populace is going to find it off-putting to have somebody speaking what they consider to be truth to power in a state in that case, she's doing it against the legislature. The legislature is not a popular institution by any survey. So I'm sure the Republicans are checking that out, and they're going to have to be careful. I also will shift to say that I think one of, if not the most important races on the ballot has not gotten hardly any attention this year, and that's the Attorney General.
I knew you were going to say that. That is I'm so with you on that. See, I feel like...
Talk to us about that.
Yeah, I think, and I don't say this lightly. I really try to be careful about hyperbole. I believe he's probably the most dangerous man in the state right now.
And name him for
James Uthmeier.
Yeah.
He is, and that is because of the position he holds and the positions he takes.
Yes.
He is a violator of the U.S. Constitution, not decided by me, decided by court justices, decided by conservative court justices, decided by justices appointed by Donald Trump, who worked for Rick Scott. He has repeatedly not cared about the rights he was trampling, and in a position to do a lot of damage. Democrats actually have what I think is a very solid candidate, and Jose Javier Rodriguez, JJR is what he goes by. For locals who are really into politics, they remember he's the guy who got hosed out of a seat down in the ghost candidate scandal. It was 2020, I think it was. It was basically arranged for a handful of candidates, but it worked in his. He only lost by a few dozen votes because of this scandal. And he's a smart guy. He's an attorney. He's a law professor. Unlike James Uthmeier, he wasn't getting, $100,000 for his side hustle at the university. I think that is important. And I think Democrats nationally need to recognize the importance. I also think Uthmeier's potentially vulnerable.
I do too. I think that may actually be one of the best, maybe the best chance.
That's why I mentioned it. I don't think Alligator Alcatraz is popular with anybody right now. You could not possibly make a solid fiscal conservative argument for Alligator Alcatraz. It was extremely expensive. It was handed out in no bid contracts. The rights were violated by most. They still haven't done state ordered audits on this thing. It got closed. I mean, really, you don't need to say anything else other than it didn't remain open for 1 year. here. They built it on environmentally sensitive land. They had all sorts of. I can't remember the contract. What was it? $90 million for a porta potty company they got out there. Even Republicans were like, let's shut that down. So I think Uthmeier is vulnerable. I think he's got a lot of vulnerabilities. He's been held in contempt of court as Attorney General. So I think there is a vulnerability there. And I also think in the other cabinet position for CFO, I mentioned Blaise Ngoglier. I think Annette Taddeo is not she's a solid candidate too. And I think Blaise is a buffoon. I'm not saying anything I haven't said in the column before. I mean, he's an auditor the way Homer Simpson is a pastry chef. I mean, he just goes in and throws out numbers, doesn't justify them with any way. And it's a clown show. So I think I think you're going to have a real tough time in that Senate race, but I think those two races are, if I was Democrats, I would focus on that, particularly Uthmeier.
And especially because, and Taddeo is good as well, but I mean, JJR, he's been on the trail, he's been talking to a lot of people. I mean, you hear that guy talk, he's so good. I mean, he's such a good candidate. He
is. And the question is, will most Floridians hear him talk? I don't think he's really known outside of South Florida right now. And you're going to need, I don't know, 20, 30, you're going to need millions of dollars to get that message out. Yeah. And we'll see what because Uthmeier's got it. He's already got tons of it. And I mean, we could do a whole other show on him. I mean, one of the other reasons he has so much money is because he does favors for the people who are giving him money. Well, I won't say it's proven that he's done favor. I'll say that he does things that people who give him money want.
Yeah. Well, and he grabs attention for, I mean, he'll issue subpoenas and something and like literally never follow up, but he gets media attention. So I feel like his name is just constantly out there, is doing something. And, unfortunately that can be helpful, just having your name out there repeatedly.
It is.
When people don't really understand what it is.
I think he's overplayed his hand, but we'll see. But yeah, I think that race deserves a lot of attention.
So we have another big race here in Orange County.
Yeah.
For mayor.
Right.
I was actually surprised by the run, two people in the runoff. But did you have any thoughts on that race?
Yeah, I would say that I thought Stephanie Murphy was going to make the runoff, and these were all degrees of just a point or two. It was a 4-person race, and I don't have the numbers in front of me. You might remember them, but Tiffany Moore Russell came in first with 30-something%, and then Stephanie Murphy and the Republican Chris Messina were separated by 1 point. I want to say 28 and 27 points like that, is what they were. I think it surprised a lot of people that Stephanie Murphy did not do better because she had more money than all of the candidates combined. I think that may have ended up being a drawback. The same way Democrats weren't really smitten with Alex Vindman because they hadn't seen him on the front lines of Florida. I think there were a lot of Orange County people who thought we liked you in Congress, but what do you know about the county? And if the first thing they learned was that Disney gave $100,000 to her to put her in office, I don't think that's a selling point in this community anymore. There might have been at one point in time, but I don't. And that was just one of several $100,000 checks she had, including a developer out in East Orange County and Michael Bloomberg's group. I think it was up there. I think the money actually worked against her, but also worked against her that there was a candidate in the race who probably shouldn't have been in there, Myra Uribe. That's a complicated story, but there was a lot of pressure for her to drop out, and among Democrats who said, you're hosing us over here because you're letting the governor appoint somebody, give up her seat or drop out of the race. But anyway, she peeled a bit away. I don't think there's any question. I would bet everything in my wallet, which is probably not very much right now, that Tiffany Moore Russell is going to win this race. This is a heavily blue county. You've probably told your listeners before that we are one of the few counties where Republicans are actually the third party here. NPAs outnumber Republicans in Orange County. Chris Messina got 28%. I think I've got these numbers right. And that's like exactly what the population of Republican voters are. So that works really well in a 4-way race. 28% is going to get you to the top two. 28% doesn't do well in a two-way race. So I would be shocked if anything other than Moore Russell. But you know what? We've seen candidates collapse before, so who knows? Yeah.
Well, I thought it was interesting in that race, a couple of donations, some AI donations, which I think are, playing just such a big role. Well, they're at least trying to play a big role in current elections. And also I saw a charter school donation to Murphy's campaign. And that's relatively new to see. It was academia, I think, to see them donating, kind of outside of school board races.
You're telling me something I'd forgotten or missed. So well, I think basically all of the money was going toward her, and she was viewed as the favorite early on. In fact, one of the more amusing things was I found amusing was that the Central Florida Hotel Lodging Association endorsed Murphy very early on, and then. I'm not exactly sure when it was, added a second endorsement of Tiffany Moore Russell, which is a little odd because best I can determine, only one person can have that mayor's race. But I think they saw some of the writing on the wall. People were following the money to begin with, and then saw some of the people power. And I think it's fair to say progressives rallied behind Tiffany Moore Russell. I think Stephanie was viewed as sort of Buddy Dyer, Jerry Demings 2.0, a moderate, business-friendly candidate. And I'm not sure if Orange County residents are looking for business friendly right now. I mean, we just a week and a half ago had what I considered a monumental vote when the mayor's task force basically shot down an expansion of the convention center. That's never happened in Orange County before, and that's because hoteliers have said we need to spend more money because every time you do anything there, it boosts their count. I'd argue it doesn't do great things for the community at large. My argument has historically lost, but it won, and it won overwhelmingly, like in a 28-2 vote. So I'm not sure that the having the business community's support is a great badge. And in fact, 2 years ago, every single candidate for the county commission who was endorsed by the Hotel Lodging Association lost.
Wow.
Oh, I hadn't clocked that. Okay,
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
So aside from the sort of who has won and who will win, what about a vision for Orange County? Like, what do you hope this next mayor is going to do for Orange County? And what do you want their focus to be?
That's a great question, and I hadn't prepared an answer. But I would tell you that if I look back at what I have written through the years, if I had to focus on one thing, it's wages. And some people might misunderstand that to mean I want a minimum wage increase. That's not what I'm talking about. I want to focus on jobs, on creating jobs that pay people more, that allow them to make ends meet. We are one of the two worst cities in America for an affordable housing shortage. And the other one is Las Vegas. That's not a coincidence. Yeah. It's because we're both tourism-based economies. When you build your economy on the backs of people who change bed linens for a living, they're not going to be able to make ends meet. And Eric Gray, who's a guy I like and I think is very smart, he runs the Christian Service Center and is now running for the legislature. He and I he met. I think he used to be a little further right. He was than I was. We sort of bonded over the fact that wages and living an economy it's just math. It's just math. And I'm doing visual gestures on your audio podcast, which is very helpful. If a big chunk of your community makes this much and it requires this much to live, there's a gap between the two.
Yeah, there's space between the hands, listeners.
Then there's a gap. And we have a choice on how we're going to fill that gap. You can fill that gap through welfare, by you giving people housing vouchers, by giving them food stamps, or you can elevate that wage floor. I'd rather elevate that wage floor by focusing more on jobs that pay better. Yeah. I'm not saying we need to decimate the tourism industry, but we have subsidized the tourism industry billions with the B dollars of hotel tax dollars on things like Visit Orlando, on things like never-ending expansions of the convention center, so that every time the Orlando Economic Partnership, touts a new tech company that comes out in the research park near UCF, it is great. But for every 20 jobs we've added in that, we've added another 200 hotel housekeepers. That's a drag. That is a drag on the community. So I would have a vision that this we are focusing on being something beyond tourism.
Yeah.
Something, and in a lot of ways we already have evolved. I mean, like arts and culturally, we're great with culinary scene. We've come. There's some tourism towns where you have to go down to the tourism corridor to really experience the good stuff. We've got that here, but I think economically we have got to do better.
Well, and one of the reasons that we don't always get some of those higher paying jobs and industries is because, some people don't view our schools as strong. And so I think investing in schools is critical to that too, because you are not going to get those people to come here if they don't view, that there's a wide variety of high quality schools to choose from. And I think we do have very high quality schools, but it's something we need to continue to invest in, and we need to invest to make sure they have what they need.
Education is so crucial. I am from Durham, North Carolina, and I think a lot of people know today that is Research Triangle Park. It is there are jobs galore. There's tech, there is medicine. That shouldn't have happened. And it didn't happen by accident. That's North Carolina is the buckle of the Bible Belt, right? There's as many Confederate War memorials as there are in South Carolina up there. The reason it happened is because 100 years ago, leaders in North Carolina invested in education, and particularly higher education. And they put Duke, and they put UNC, and they put North Carolina State. And when you have that sort of ecosphere of education going off, it spins off tech jobs, it spins off medical jobs. It all starts with education in a lot of cases, and Orange County, I think, has been good about trying to invest in sort of the technical aspects of getting people prepared for careers right out of school. But I think we need to also just shoot higher. I've often said one of the bigger things that was good for this community was the medical school at UCF. Yep. That keeps research here. It gives doctors here. But I think we have to have a lot more of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting that you say that. We've had this conversation about this push from the state for more technical education, which I think is important, but definitely not at the expense of making sure our students are also prepared to go to college if that's what they choose to do.
Right.
And it's something that it concerns me.
A future episode of the podcast, for sure.
For sure.
Yeah.
But I think to your greater point, if you look at places that are high wage, high quality of life, good quality education is almost always there. 30 years ago, when I was a beat reporter, 25 years ago, I did a piece comparing Austin to Orlando because this community was fascinated with Austin, and the Chamber of Commerce even took a cartel out there to say, look at what Austin does. Austin invested in education. Austin invested in venture capitalism. Austin ventured in sort of technology and all of those things that we had not. And I feel like we sent a cartel out there and we went, wow. And then we came back as Cletus the slack-jawed yokel and said, how much more we want to expand the convention center again.
Yeah. But man, those breakfast tacos were on point.
I love that. I believe that was your second Simpsons reference.
It was. I'm not even a super fan, but that was. You're right.
At the beginning of this podcast, we were talking about you just as a columnist, generally, how you go about it. And I kind of want to circle back to that area outside of politics. And just looking back, you've written so much. You've been on this job for over 2 decades. When you look back, what are the columns that you've written that still stick in your mind, or that people still bring up to you that still resonate with them?
Dog poop.
Okay. Always a popular one.
I've written that one twice because I'll be silly, but these are true. I've written a couple of times about whether it's okay to put bags of poop in your neighbor's trash can. I personally didn't think that was a thing. I thought, very few rules in a civilized society, and one is that we don't take bags of fecal matter and give them to somebody else. Turns out other people disagree. Turns out one of those people was my wife. We had 25 years of marriage. I thought it was going to be over when I learned that, but we worked through it. In case your listeners are wondering, the general consensus seems to be that it's okay to put dog poop in somebody else's trash can on trash day when the trash can's already put out and the trash is still in the can.
I endorse that.
Okay. I still don't really like it, but and I did a column, and gosh, it was at least 15 years about going to something called sex camp, and it was, I don't know if you're familiar with it. It was the Methodists, I think they run. It's basically like sex ed for teenagers, except parents go with their kids, and it is just as awkward as it sounds. I mean, there are people, I remember some mom was like, I've got a question about wet dreams. And I was just like,
oh my God.
I wish the world would swallow me whole. And you're doing this with your 13-year-old kid. But I wrote about that, and it was a mostly funny column. And honestly, it was a great thing that my son and I did together. And aside from sex, here's a little tip. You may know that I picked up there. They said one of the best places you can ever talk to your children is in the car. And that is because it's not just because they're a captive audience, which is part of it, but it's because you're both sitting and you're facing stare and you're not making each other awkward by looking in the eyes. I mean, there were some great things I picked up from that, but after I wrote about it, I heard a lot, including from a nun who said the next time I go, she'd like to go with me. And that allowed me to write a column on taking a nun to sex camp. And so people remembered that as well. But of serious ones, I think wages is one I've really tried to hammer home, and I've gotten help with data crunchers. And it was about 20 years ago for the first time we crunched the numbers that said out of America's top 50 metros, we were dead last, 50th for wages. And you have to work hard to be dead last out of 50. I mean, we're like I can't remember the exact number, we're like the 24th or 20 somewhere in that largest metro. So we're trailing, pick whatever city you hear people bemoan, whether it's Detroit or Louisville, whatever it is, we're behind them all. And we recently came to 49th. We flip-flopped with Las Vegas, who I mentioned again. They're dead last. But I think that's one. And then I do some annual columns. Next weekend is one of my annual ones that takes a lot of time. It's 10 People Who Make Orlando a Better Place to Live. And it's a really feel-good affair. And I throw out the nomination to readers. And each year I'll get about 100 folks that are nominated. And I would say that I probably know half of the people who are nominated, and about half I have no clue. And it is wonderful to get to research those folks. And through the years, there have been a lot of people in the nonprofit sector, but there's also been medical researchers. There's been jailhouse ministers. There's been chefs who are just particularly innovating and making not only in providing a better culinary scene, but better working conditions for anyway, I could go on, but that's a pretty fun exercise to do.
Oh, I love that.
And I love how you shine the light on so many great people in our community. I mean, that was one of the things I didn't like a lot of things about campaigning, but one of the things I did like was you do meet so many great people and great groups in our community who are doing things, and it really gives you hope, and it really makes you realize, there's maybe some bad things going on, but man, there are some really good people in our community.
There are so many, and I mentioned the nuns. The nun I mentioned was actually one of the famous Apopka nuns out, and I don't know if you're familiar with them at all. But those are the kind of people who I've met that are truly humbling. And when you spend a little time with people who have given everything of themselves, I mean, whether it's for farm workers or the poor or to teach immigrants to read, and when I say they give everything, they've never had a house of their own, they've never made money, they've lived together. It's inspiring in the truest sense of the word. It makes you want to be a better person. So,
Well, one thing I just wanted to close on is we talked a little bit about the beginning about how you started off at the Sentinel. There were 400 people. Now there's 40 people. And I think everybody is hopefully familiar with just the struggle that's happening right now in journalism. But if you could give our listeners just some things they could do to support local journalists like you. There's so many others who are doing great work. Jason Garcia has been on the pod a couple of times. He's just doing wonderful work too. How can we support local journalism to just make sure that we have the great investigative and work that you all do?
Yeah, I appreciate that. And Jason's one of my best friends. We talk just about every day. In fact, you mentioned AI. He and I were just yesterday sort of debating amongst ourselves. We're trying to figure out how much that's going to play into into this election cycle. But yeah, I think subscribing and reading is probably the best thing you can do. I'm not a fan of the groups that own papers these days, including my own. I've written as much. That's not a secret. And I will say, God bless them for letting me write that. I work for a company that, much to their credit, under 3 different owners at least, has never told me what I can say and never told me what I can't say. But we are owned by companies like many newspapers that do not care about journalism. I think they would tell you they do not care about journalism. They buy assets that they believe they can siphon off profits and take them out of this community and put them into their investors' hands, and it's not a great place to be. Most of my friends have left the newspaper business, including Jason, though he's still on the front lines doing his own thing. But he left. I had lunch with the same 4 guys for 20 years, and all 4 of them left within a few years of each other. The people who are still here, for the most part, are the true believers. I often say I'm not good enough to be the captain of the Titanic, but you remember the guys who are playing Nearer My God to Thee while the icy waters rose and the ship sank? I kind of think that's where I am and we are. most of us, I could have made a lot more money doing a lot of other things. I've had offers, but I'm not trying to sound like a martyr. I'm just trying to say that those of us here are here because we want to be here, and because we care about this community. Some people say, why didn't you go to New York, or why didn't you go to do TV? I actually had a broadcast major originally, and I was like, there's 1,000 people, there's 1 million people screaming about Donald Trump, right? There are 1 million pundits being gas bags about that. I want to be a local gas bag. I think maybe we can have some impact on the things we're writing about here. When some people ask me, like, why don't you write about Donald Trump, and they want me to, I often say, oh, do you not know how to feel? I mean, everybody's already got an opinion on that. I'd rather open their eyes to the complexities of hotel taxes and why it makes a difference, and the debates that you all are having at the school board. So we do have a fund, and I'm the world's worst ambassador for the paper. It's like the Sentinel Community News Fund. I don't even remember what it's called. Yeah. I'll send it to you if you have show notes or something like that. We'll put it in, they do donations, and that's for we use that money exclusively to like fight legal battles. It is tough to get public records, tougher than it's ever been in this state right now. Basic things require months of wait and sometimes thousands of dollars. And we've won like virtually every time we've challenged it because we're right. We're not asking for public documents that aren't public documents. But anyway, I would say read and subscribe and tell other people. You know, we've raised a whole generation that, maybe 2 generations now, that just think they can get all of the news they want from TikTok or from Instagram. And even if those places are linking to other devices, you're not getting the texture you need to really have an informed debate. I think newspapers, we have our faults. We have a lot of faults, but I think we do it as well as anybody in getting diverse opinions in the paper. I mean, our editorial pages, if you look, there's guest columns that say all kinds of batshit stuff, including that I'm not a very good person. And can you imagine anybody would say that? We've got a diverse range of opinions, and we try to get it right. We really try to get it right. And in occasions where we get it wrong, we put clarifications out there. I think we're trying to give all perspectives, so I would encourage other people to follow the news.
So you have your homework.
Your marching orders.
Exactly. Thank you, Scott Maxwell, for your time today.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you for the incredible work you are doing for our community.
I appreciate that. It's like I said, I'm here because I love it. And every Thanksgiving, I do a column of 101 things to love about Central Florida. And one of the great things is it's always tough. I've been doing it for like 15 years, and there's always way more things.
Well, that's a good problem.
Yeah, it's a good problem to have.
So. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks.